Hello, everyone. My name is Shawn O'Leary, and this is my summer 2021 residency presentation. So goals going into the summer residency were to work on designs that complement forms, as well as to explore and perfect tableware forms. I found myself more working on the perfecting part, but the goal was to work on bowls, mugs, plates, jars, cups, pitchers, all those functional tableware forms. So I started off the residency working on bowls. So for the first week, I made probably around 30, 40 bowls, and I just cut them in half just to see where I needed to improve, where the clay was, if it was thin enough, if it was too thick, because the reason for cutting these in half was to see where the clay was, but really my focus when making these bowls was to make them so I did not have to trim them. So the key pointers when I started cutting the first set of bowls for the first day was that I had a little groove right in the center on the bottom inside this little circle, as well as I'm leaving too much clay in the bottom, which is taken away from the point of not having to trim it. So once I started getting a little bit better at the groove on the bottom and not having too much clay, I kept about 5 bowls, and this is one of them from this little set that I made. And I didn't really know the glazes that they have there, so I kind of experimented with them, but I just wanted to put one of these in there because another thing that after making these and kind of fixing these little problems that I had, Wynn pointed out that it's more of a V shape instead of more rounded U bowl shape. And so the one positive thing he said about this was that the flow and the curve through the bowl was good, but on the outside it was a little too V'd. So that was one thing, another thing I needed to work on when making these and having, while keeping in mind the thickness and having that groove on the bottom. So on my second set of bowls, oh, there we go. The second set of bowls is the one on the left, and I made it actually a different clay. It was the Rio Red clay. The first clay I used was the B mix with grog. And so I started getting it better, getting that U shape, a little more bowly, a little better. But things I needed to work on in this set were rim thicknesses. They kind of varied in the whole set. So some were a little bit thicker, thinner, or a little more curved out, curved in. And as well as the bottom went out further than that actually touches the table or the ground or the wood in this instance. So I needed to focus on getting that groove, the inside to match the outside. And so once I went on to the third set, after also making more bowls, cutting them, double checking that I'm getting all these little things that I've done wrong in the previous set to be better in the third set. Once I started getting them better, I got this third set of bowls. So on the rims, I kind of rounded them out, made them a little bit thicker, and got the bottom working better. And some conversations got brought up when making these bowls. So at the beginning, I asked him how much clay do you use to make an average size bowl? He said about 1.5 pounds. So that's what I started working with the whole time I was there making bowls. And another thing got brought up when I made the second set on the left was my bowls were quite bigger than Wynn's. And he kind of pointed out saying that like I'm making them really thin. Is that how I wanted to make them? And when making them, yes, that was how I wanted to make them. But the thought of, he brought up having them really thin bowl is your preference, obviously, but I keep them a little bit thicker when saying that, because when you put them in a sink or you're washing them out or putting them together, they're less likely to crack. And bowls, as we know, sometimes putting them in the sink, you put them in a little bit rough. And for the functionality and the longevity of having a bowl that I sell, this really made me think about making my bowls a bit thicker because I want them to last. I want them to be more functional. And so in the third set, I made them a bit thicker. And I think I'm going to continue doing that, as I want my bowls to be as functional and user friendly as possible. All right, then the second thing I mostly focused on during this residency was mugs and the handling more specifically. So on the left, there's a pitcher and a couple mugs. And to start off, I wanted to point out that when handling, I pull the handles and then I attach them and then I pull them one more time. And so when doing this, first I was having a little trouble with the timing of how soft or how dry the clay is when attaching the handles. And so a little technique Wynn showed me was to pour a little water, introduce water back into the clay body. So pour water into the cup and dip it in some water if it needs more moisture. And so I began doing that. And then when attaching the handles, he also gave me a little pointer. Here's a mug, for example. I was pulling the handles when it was completely perpendicular, but if you tip it up a little bit more, it gives it a little more top of the handle, a little more shape. So I started doing that. That was another key thing, thinking about handles and when making handles and making them more functional, and then leaving them upside down as well. That helps them to dry. When explained to me, it helps them dry, and then I can reshape it after a little time of them drying and kind of make them the shape I exactly want. And then the third thing was I started having a little troubles with cracking, and he pointed out that if I just, after handling them, just cover them up and just let them dry like more uniform, so the handle and the cup dry together, I will not have any cracking, which I started doing, and it really worked. So these are a couple mugs that came through fully finished, and I just want to point out the handle shapes. So the one on the left is a little more D-shaped, and the one on the right's a little more pointed. And we talked about that and how a little more rounded is more of a handle, more of like a 2-finger, 3-finger, depending on the size of your handle. And then the more pointed ones is more of like a 1-finger handle. And just the ergonomics of it, it's all preference, but I found that them being a little more D-shaped, more rounded, it feels a little more comfortable to me, and I hope I feel more comfortable to others. So I'm going to start focusing on keeping my handles around that shape. And then here's how the sets came out. These sets came out, and the handles were pretty identical, not exactly identical. So I still need to work on just thickness and exact shape. And then I wanted to put these in there. These are the only 2 vases I made during the residency, but I got a key technique or key thing to do when making bulbous vases, is that the one on the left, as you can see, is a little more flat around the top curve, rather than the one on the right, it's a little more rounded in the top. And he pointed out after making the first one, he's like, if you go from the top to the bottom, to round it out just like that, it helps to make it a little more rounded. And that obviously did help as I made this second one after, and it's definitely a bit more rounded, more uniform round, not exactly uniform, but a lot closer. And then he also pointed out my foot. I put a foot, as you can see on both of the, I don't know if you can see on the one on the left, but one on the right, you can kind of see it at the bottom right down here. And he just pointed out the functionality of this. The one on the right, my idea was to make the foot the same width as the opening at the top, but that took away from the functionality. So I needed to really focus on, when making these, I need to focus on, if I'm making a foot, I need to make it so it's sturdy, as this one on the right and the left are a little bit unsturdy. So the functionality of it isn't quite sound. Okay, and then onto this slide is just a couple things I made that were just kind of for fun, kind of take my mind off just kind of experiment a little bit. But mainly I wanted to point out was the glazing part of this residency, and how just for these, the Temoku, a little technique he showed me was, in order to help it break on the edges, was to, after it dries, kind of scrub it with your finger and take off a little bit of glaze, and it'll help make the glaze break on the edges. And I think it worked really well. As you can see on the edges, it broke. And I'm I was planning on trying a little bit more faceting. Did not get quite into it, but that's how that went. And then as well as the glazes, he taught me about measuring the thickness. He had a measurement tool. I forget exactly what it's called, but he taught me how to use that tool. And also, just if I don't have that tool, just dip my finger in, and if I can see the color of my fingernail through it, then it's probably too thin. But about the right thickness is, you just want to see the outline of your fingernail, but you don't want to see the color of your fingernail. And I thought that was a really good tool to take with me as I go on in pottery. All right. Key takeaways from this residency. The number one takeaway from this residency is one question that Wynn asked me while I was making a couple bowls or cups. I forget exactly what I was making, but this question just stuck with me. And he said, "Do I want to make brothers and sisters, or do I want to make cousins?" I said, "What do you mean, Wynn? What do you mean by that?" And he was explaining to me that if I'm making brothers and sisters, I'm making them almost exactly the same, exactly alike. Or am I making cousins that are just a little bit off, really close to the exact same, but a little bit off, and just not worrying about brothers and sisters being exact. I think that kind of stuck with me, and I thought about it, and I was like, wow, I think as I go through this and become a potter, hopefully in the future, I will want to focus on making cousins. I don't want to be too precise. I don't want to be a machine. I feel handmade pottery has a little bit of differences between the pots. Although they're really similar, they're a little bit different because they're handmade. So that's what I want to do. And I think that was just like key for me to just understand that as I go further into making pottery and hopefully becoming full time. And then also to concentrate on when I'm making the pot and what's its function, what am I going to use it for, what it's used for, and what ways can I make the pot better for its function. And whether that be thicker or thinner walls, as discussed when I was making the bowls, or handle shape, whether it fits fingers better and works better for people to drink out of, or putting foots on, making it so it's sturdy or not sturdy, and just keeping these little details when making these, and really focusing on what the functionality is and what will make it better for its function. And also measuring the glaze thickness, as I explained. So those were my key takeaways, and I appreciate everyone who gave me this opportunity to do this residency. And thank you for listening.